Hello all, hope you guys are all well, all safe, having a great week. Tonight, Middlesex University Product Design Engineering and Design Engineering are really excited to host our 12th talk in the annual guest lecture series. So these run weekly throughout the academic year. On Thursday evenings, they bring together a vibrant mix of speakers from across the full spectrum of design and engineering. So a mix of leading practitioners, opinion leaders, radical thinkers, and emerging talents to inspire and support the professional development of our participants. And tonight we're really excited to host Sander Valk, a product designer and design researcher at Imperial College London. So Sander's speciality is in strategic interaction design and user experience design. His educational background includes a BSc in product design from the University of Bradford, an MSc in design for interaction from the Delft University of Technology in Amsterdam. And Sander's worked at Unilever, Triumph, and he's collaborated in research-driven design innovation projects in various industries, FMCG, aerospace, spatial design. And Sander is currently at his co-founded startup, Lumi6, where he does qualitative research for the fuzzy front end of new product development, conducting user interviews, generating workshops, and usability testing, concept design. And alongside this, he's also developing novel tools for facilitating and supporting interdisciplinary, so science meets design, science collaborates with design, collaborations. He's based at the Dyson School of Design Engineering at Imperial College London on the fantastic South Kensington campus. And the details of the talk and Sander was sent to your emails ahead of the talk, including links to Sander's social media, his Twitter, his LinkedIn, and his website as well. So definitely feel free to have a browse and connect with Sander online. And without any further ado, Sander Valk with a talk titled Radical Innovation Needs Radical Collaboration, a Designerly Perspective. It's all yours, Sander.
Thanks so much, Ahmed. Thanks for the kind words in the introduction. Didn't quite realize there was so much to say about what I've done in the past. But thanks for having me here this evening. I think I'll try to keep you entertained for about 40 minutes or so, and then we can have a bit of Q&A afterwards, hopefully. So as Ahmed said, I'm a design researcher and product designer, probably mostly in that order today. Mostly I'm doing research, but I try to do some product design as when I can as well. My talk's going to be mostly sort of divided into three parts. So the first category, I'll talk about my journey so far. So this is going to be the kind of personal bit where I get to talk about myself only. The second part's going to be about collaborations and why collaborating in general is important. And the last bit gets a bit sciencey and a bit nerdy. I'm going to talk about my PhD research a bit more in detail, which is about collaborations between design engineers and scientists, and with particular focus on bioscientists and designers working together. But to start off with my background, my kind of, when I went to school and was about to kind of start uni, I had some interest in architecture, art, science, and literature, which kind of made me quite puzzled as to what I wanted to do. I guess mostly I wanted to become an architect, but I was never that good at it, so I didn't get to do that. I was into art. I was doing lots of graphic design stuff. I was painting, but I don't think I really considered myself talented enough to become an artist. I did like some science stuff. I liked bio stuff, but I was completely helpless at chemistry and physics most of the time. And I also liked literature, but I didn't really know what to do with that. So I just thought that, hey, this is cool. And I like reading about different stuff from about future and the past and the current affairs. And I thought it's cool, but what do I do with this? Well, ended up doing a product design degree, which was really quite interesting and did in some way manage to bring together perspectives from all these 4 areas. So I went to school in Estonia, which is a country which you usually probably only hear about when you watch Eurovision. So it's one of those tiny countries in northeast of Europe. And back there, we only actually had 1 or 2 universities that offered product design. And most of that product design was kind of leaning on the art side of things. But I didn't feel comfortable with that idea. And that's why I thought, hey, I'll just go abroad and study the kind of more engineering and manufacturing branch of design, or what ended up being design engineering. So I went to study in the University of Bradford. I started my degree in 2010, I want to say, or 29. And most of the skills that I acquired there were really about technical stuff, and I was looking a lot into ergonomics and a lot of stuff about the design process as well. So lots of sort of technical detailing, how to actually make things work, making lots of drawings, figuring out the material qualities. So perhaps quite relatable to what you guys are also doing today. But I guess what I'm mostly grateful about is this sort of overview about designing and being able to cover all sorts of phases of the design process, from ideation to conceptualization, and also being able to make some working prototypes that might include some electronics and other types of clever mechanisms. So that's my graduation project. I made a drum computer, which is based on an analog drum machine. And I targeted the sort of semi-professional musician with this design. And it has this clever dual hinge type of mechanism that makes it foldable. So it's really handy to chuck in a van if you're going to do a concert somewhere. So yeah, I was in general pretty happy with looking at buttons and rotary dials. So that was a good time. I think it was between the third and fourth year where I also took a year out and actually did a full year work placement, industrial placement, they called it. And officially I was a product development engineer for a company that manufactured all sorts of products of sheet metal, so lifts, doors, and also kind of systems for subways and underground stations. And my task there was to develop a new door for improved building, new door for improved thermal insulation. So I was doing a lot of research with polymers, testing out how heat transmits between different materials and how we can make a thermally sufficient door for kind of Nordic countries and colder climates in general. But then after I graduated, I guess I was trying to figure out what the big picture really is. And as I mentioned, most of the stuff I did was quite technical, and I had the feeling that I don't really have the skills or methods or courage to kind of do stuff on the conceptual level. So I guess I was trying to reframe myself and what I wanted to become by asking these famous questions that designers always use in their design projects. I guess I was trying to apply that to my own future career path. And yeah, I thought that I have the skills to make stuff, but I didn't have the skills to make meaningful things, or what sort of things are actually worthwhile making, because we shouldn't just make stuff to clatter the planet further. So I did some deep searching and thinking, and was lucky enough that I graduated with a decent enough grade from my undergraduates to get offered a place at Delft to do a master's in design for interaction. Little did I know that Delft was actually a brilliant place to do design and design research. At the time, I actually had no idea. I went there with quite naively and found out this pretty amazing facility and university, which is absolutely huge in size. It's got all sorts of facilities for making all sorts of things, prototyping, all sorts of studio spaces, and top quality people as well. So that was a really intense 2-year period, which offered a lot. And let me just play this for you. I'm guessing what I was looking for in terms of being able to do more conceptual stuff, I did manage to find in Delft. So here, most of my modules or my projects were really about designing for stuff like user experience or emotion, subjective well-being, human-computer interaction, usability, or even hospitality and spatial design. So I guess I was really looking more into the cognitive side of design and trying to figure out what happens in the heads of users instead of their fingers or backs or bottoms. So I was trying to get into the kind of mindset of the user and figure out what they actually need and kind of discover the needs that they might not be aware of. It was a really intense period of time, packed with lots of different activities, which at times was quite overwhelming. And by the end of it, I again was faced with this situation that I felt that, okay, I know so much about, I can do user testing, I can build interactive prototypes, and I guess I'm pretty okay with conceptual design, but I still didn't know like what directions should be. So I decided to do my so kind of a collaborative master's graduation project with a professor called Paul Heckert, who is also the author of a method called Vision in Design or Vision in Product Design, which I do encourage you to look up. But basically, it's a kind of I guess it's a method, it's an approach, and it's a worldview, I suppose, by which before you really start designing, you try to, in a strategic way, understand the qualities of products that exist in the world today, and you decode the interactions that take place between the products and people, and also between people. And you also do a really deep analysis of the context in which these interactions take place. So I applied this method, and I think I'm using it ever since, either the full version or as kind of light touch version of vision and product design. And it's also useful for research in general, I think. But for my graduation project, I designed something that was called the Reflector, which was a spatial design intervention for a music festival called Into the Great Wide Open. So this festival took place, and it still will take place next year as well, on one of the fairly remote Dutch islands. It's a fairly small festival, I think about 6,000 visitors maximum. And it's a really kind of a diverse mix of different musical genres and people who do visit. But I think I was motivated to do a project with this festival because I'd always been interested in music. So also my bachelor's project was in, well, I made a musical device or a redesign of it. So now I was interested in bringing a new experiences to a music festival. So I did my analysis and research and found that when people do go to these festivals, they actually do get overwhelmed, which is quite opposite as to why they actually go to the music festival. So this type of festival that takes place in a natural environment on an island, people usually go there to relax and detach and kind of get rid of all these digital stimulations that they have when they are at work in city. But actually, when they do go to the festival, they also get trapped in this sort of routine, and it gets quite it can get mundane for them. So I wanted to bring an experience that really changes their perception in some way and kind of shakes up the rituals and routines that they're doing. So in essence, and in short, I designed this installation that enables people who climb into the installation to become invisible for other people, but it still gives them the privilege to see everyone else around them. So we wanted to offer them, the users, a possibility to detach themselves from the rest of the festival and the activities, and also not really be seen by anyone, and do whatever they want to do when they are isolated from the rest of the crowd. So that was the kind of thinking behind it. And I was really, really glad that when I was doing my user research and interviews afterwards, this goal that I set out in the beginning seemed to be I think it was met. So that was a really, really cool project, I think. And I've taken this installation to a few festivals after this as well. It still exists. It's a kind of flat pack design, so it can be shipped quite easily worldwide if needed. So I graduated with this kind of mindset from my master's and started missing the UK, oddly enough, and moved back to the UK, but this time to London because some of my good friends lived in the area. And I thought I need to experience the South as well. So I moved to London and also started my own design studio with my partner Sylvia, who's also now my wife. So this is a little design studio that we run, and we kind of aim to do qualitative user research for innovation. And by that, what I mean is we do user interviews and we do contextual explorations, and we analyze the user experience with different products. And then at the end, we propose a new concept. So at least this is kind of how we position ourselves and what we would like to do. In reality, what we end up doing a lot of the time is stuff like corporate visual identity for different brands. We do bits of UI and UX design. We end up doing marketing and also exhibition design. So a little bit of a spatial design for exhibitions and kind of how the stands are curated and what kind of experience people would have. But there's also some straightforward product design. So for example, I designed a pellet boiler for again kind of Nordic countries. So it's kind of a sustainable pellet boiler where you use natural resources to heat up your house. So that was a cool project. So there's some variety, and it's keeping us busy. I think this is the kind of end of the first phase of the talk, and now I'm going to talk more about collaborations and the importance of collaborations. So during my master's, I also did a project at Unilever, where I was a part of the Disruptive Design Innovation Studio, which sounds quite daunting. So this was based at the Unilever R&D near Rotterdam. And our task at the time was to design a fast-moving consumer goods related packaging experience design for a product which had a perception which was kind of falling in the eyes of users and customers. So it was our task to come up with a new perception and a whole new experience for the product. I think this was a kind of a rare or quite a phenomenal project in many ways, but I think most importantly because of the teammates that I was lucky enough to have. It was quite a multidisciplinary team at the time. So we had people whose background was in design, kind of embodied design and integrated design. So people, Mary was the one who was really the one who can make stuff work and can build stuff. So I was the one kind of in charge of the sort of interaction and experience. And we also had strategy and innovation background people, so Tom and Eric in the team. So it was a really great team to work with, and I think it changed my kind of perception as to what a multidisciplinary team can achieve. But further to that, I think the most interesting finding in hindsight from this project was that as a disruptive design innovation studio placed in this huge R&D development, we were kind of acting as a connector between many of the other departments. There were people working with, I don't know, taste buds, and people work with very technical stuff who are doing injection molding, for example. And we kind of had to run between all of these people to make sure that what we propose as a design concept is actually possible to execute with their given machinery and science. So that was a really interesting experience into kind of being this communicator between different departments. And what we realized as a team actually was that there's often in big organizations and R&D centers, there's a very kind of siloed approach to working, and people work in their own departments. behind closed doors, which makes communication quite difficult, and actually communication between different departments can be very kind of cumbersome, and people even sometimes tend to avoid it because it's it's challenging. But we were kind of there and realized that, hey, there is a lot of untapped potential in these rooms, but these rooms just don't really talk to each other, and we spent a lot of time bouncing information back and forth. So that made me quite curious about this idea of collaborative design, and how could we really unlock this this creativity that exists in all of these departments, but no one seems to be bothered to bring it all together. And that's also perhaps related to the concept of wicked problems. I'm not sure, you've probably heard of this, but maybe for those who haven't, I'll just quickly describe it. So wicked problems are difficult or impossible to solve problems, and they're often incomplete, and they contain contradictions or extremely changing requirements. And also the wicked problems, they really can't be fixed. They can be sort of overcome in time, but they're never really fully fixed. There's never really one single solution to a wicked problem. So for example, I think pandemics can be seen as wicked problems. We can do stuff to keep them under control, but we can never really solve the issue of pandemics. And I thought, you know, with these wicked problems, they often require all sorts of expertise areas, and it's kind of naive to think that designers alone could fix any of the wicked problems. But I thought there's an interesting overlap between the design background of mine and these wicked problems, because as I said, my master's was in design for interaction. But I thought in more general terms, design is really good for making all sorts of interventions, but not necessarily fixing anything completely. And in essence, it's also a mission impossible. But in essence, design is really good for trying to contribute to a betterment of some situation. So more examples of wicked problems, I suppose, are the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And at the time I was thinking, okay, I would like to tackle one of these, but there is no chance that I can do this alone, and I need expertise, knowledge from different areas. And I thought, okay, what can I do with my design background? Because I need to involve policymakers, I need to involve strategy, all sorts of different stakeholders, or general public and non-governmental organizations, and maybe even lastly, the users or customers who used to be the kind of center of my attention before. So I kind of thought that you know, if you want to address these big issues, design is really important, but you do need to combine expertise areas from arts, from engineers, and also from scientists. So I just wanted to kind of define the role of design for myself, and make sure that you know, I kind of understand where my background and where my strengths are. And as I mentioned, I think that the sort of uniqueness of design as a discipline is that we're quite user-centered, and we do a pretty good job at understanding the people we design for. But we're also generalists, which means that we have lots of different skills, but we are not really mastering any of them on a very high level. And I'm sort of curious to hear your thoughts about this, and if you can relate to this, or in your case, it would be completely different. But yeah, I think the sort of user-centeredness of design as a discipline is really the key, and because we have the tools and methods to do all sorts of observations with the users, we can do interviews and extract insights from those. We're good with running different metrics to understand experiences, and kind of understand the efficiency and the effectiveness of designs that we put out there. And really importantly, we also had the sort of maker mindset. So for example, I did a project with Zodiac Aerospace by which for every week as a team, we developed a new interactive prototype. We were trying to redesign the onboard communication experience for business class passengers at the time. And I think that the ability to make prototypes that radically differ from one another on a weekly basis and test this out in a kind of research through design kind of way is a really unique value of design as a discipline. And then again, I was digging more deeper, trying to figure out what is the goal of design, perhaps quite related to the uniqueness. But I thought, okay, but what is the sort of generalizable idea for design? And I thought that designers are tool makers and problem solvers, and probably always have been. So that kind of goes again to the idea that design for something, which means that designers are really good at making stuff in order to allow other people to achieve their goals. But we are not the people who are actually allowing them to achieve the goals. And the power of design, I guess this is something I have been thinking about for quite a while, is that design is really powerful in terms of mediating, communicating, and negotiating between different people, but also between different materials, may they be living or not living. So an example here is the Silk Pavilion by MIT Mediated Matter Group, where they employed I think it was something like 17,000 silkworms to create this structure on a prefabricated piece of kind of a framework that they made. And none of the silkworms are killed or harmed in the process, which is quite rare, I think, in the kind of modern silk making procedure anyway. But I think here I kind of started to understand that the power of design to sort of mediate communication between different types of living organisms might also be really useful, and that there is perhaps something that we can use and take advantage of. And that led me to Neri Oxman's work. I'm not sure if you've been introduced to this at all, but I would encourage everyone to look it up. It's well, it was definitely mind-blowing for me at the time when I saw it, especially because I was thinking about the kind of roles of design, art, science, and engineering. And then Neri Oxman's kind of research and ethos really postulates that innovation really happens at the intersections of different disciplines. And when I found out about her work, I was quite impressed, because she managed to capture what I had been kind of attempting to think about for a long time. She had managed to capture it in a really concise and clear way. So that was really cool finding for me. But I think what the main takeaway from this map is, well, it can be viewed as a map, but it can also be viewed as a kind of compass. But the way I see it mostly is that there is creative energy involved with also all four of the domains, so design, art, science, and engineering. And in order to come up with innovative ideas or innovations, you need to facilitate the creative transfers between these knowledge spaces. And it's really helpful to understand then what is the essence of each of these knowledge space in a kind of abstract and quite broad way. But Neri's paper does it quite neatly, I think, and it's describing how science is predominantly occupied with kind of understanding and generating new knowledge, whereas engineering is mostly about utility and finding sort of finding empirical problems and converting knowledge into utility. whereby the design is the role of design is to produce embodiments of solutions that maximize function and augment human experience, and really it converts utility into behavior. I thought this was a very interesting finding, that design and behavior go hand in hand. And then the role of art is to question human behavior and create awareness of the world around us. It converts behavior into new perceptions, into new questions, and into new ways of presenting information. With that, we're going to move to the third part of the talk, and this is more specifically about science and design collaborations. And I'm going to talk why I think science and design collaborations are a worthwhile thing to look at and a worthwhile thing to investigate. So I'm kind of carrying on with the analogy of the compass here. Before I started my research, I was trying to figure out, what is the right thing to do with someone with my background. And with my background, I mean this sort of user-centered nature of looking at world and things. I actually started realizing that humans and users are flawed. People have short-term focus, whereas we should be looking to things at more long-term. We tend to be quite individualistic or tribal. So perhaps the sort of user-centeredness isn't really the best way to look at things. And then what would take place? What would take the place of the user in this on this compass? I thought that this could be science, and science could work as a kind of moral guide. So how do you follow science, and what does it actually mean? I started thinking about questions like that. But yeah, just to kind of summarize, I think if we as designers always focus on the user, we end up in a state where we are currently with the environment and other social issues as well. And perhaps we should be sort of branching out by and looking into other means to guide us. So what should guide us? And since Neri Oxman's work suggested that it's knowledge that science deals with, I thought it kind of makes sense to follow the knowledge and maybe not follow the people who might be making irrational decisions and decisions that are based on short-term goals. And then I thought, okay, how can I contribute to this? I guess by reflecting on it, I figured out that, okay, I'm a designer, I make tools. So how can I make tools for developing this way of thinking and way of doing? So I set my research out to be about science and design collaborations that are aimed at innovation-driven ideas or innovations. And when I kind of started looking deeply into this domain, I quickly realized that the future of design and future of designing really is bio-based, because there is really no other alternative. But it's really challenging, and I think there are still many people who try to hide their head into the sand away from this. Partially because it's extremely challenging and extremely difficult to have this more bio-based way of living and more bio-based products. And it's not always, it doesn't always make sense economically either. But there are signs showing that this is really the only viable way ahead. But there are some encouraging signs as well. So the bioeconomy in the EU and also the UK is growing and doubling every 5 or 10 years. There are more and more companies starting out from this area. And some people actually are saying that we are at the brink of the next industrial revolution, which is based on biological ways of manufacturing and biological ways of designing things. Which kind of makes sense, I suppose, because if we look back at the last industrial revolution, which in my view happened very much at the intersection of technology, digital technology and design, then the next one should take place at the intersection of sort of bioscience and design. And design is really important here to kind of provide this this applicability and make things tangible for the people. So there I started my PhD research with three quite broad questions, which are still relevant today as well. So these questions are: how do designers and scientists collaborate, and how to support idea generation in innovation-driven science and design entanglements, and how to design creativity support tools for science and design collaborations. I guess I'll show you the kind of scenario that we'll be looking at. So most of the time, because this collaboration space is vast, it's huge. There's so much going on at all sorts of different levels. I'm really looking at the early stage idea generation. So what you would usually describe as a creative workshop or brainstorming session type of meeting. So usually when people from diverse backgrounds come together, the meeting starts with the sharing of knowledge, which is quite challenging because people have different backgrounds and different understandings. Usually in these types of workshops, there is an element of creating something, coming up with ideas. They use sketching and note-taking. There might be some prototyping involved as well. And all of this is done with the idea that we need to get something innovative out by this, and by innovative we mean new and also useful. So that's the kind of workshop setup that we usually look at when doing this research. We've also identified approaches and frameworks that support creative thinking, which leads to design innovations. So we found 5 key contributors that support bioscientists and designers. And this is about, firstly, kind of open-endedness and experimentation. So it's a very, very playful environment that supports innovative ideas. Sort of exploring and iterating scientific discoveries, which to put it differently, it's about the scientist really explaining to the designer and also exploring together the sort of discoveries that he or she may have been working on. So building the shared understanding and shared knowledge base. It's also about sort of emotional intelligence, which is a fancy way of saying that you just need to be a nice person and you need to be interested in what the other person is doing. And a little bit of empathy goes a long way in helping this creative mindset as well. And also there's an element of learning, which we have found is kind of incidental. So learning that happens naturally when you're having a conversation with someone. Not learning that you do when you're reading a book. And also just applying design approaches in scientific processes also was seen to boost creativity and innovation mindedness. Another diagram, and sorry about that, I will try to keep those limited, is to kind of show the way that people in science and design collaborations, but probably in all sorts of collaborations work and think. So when you first go into a collaboration, you go there with your natural knowledge base. So there are certain steps that you have to do to arrive at an innovative ideas. So those steps are, firstly, you need to upgrade your knowledge base. You need to gain new knowledge, which is then the preconception for creativity, which then leads to innovation. And my research is looking at this black bubble there in the middle, which is again about this incidental and situated learning, trying to figure out how does it happen. And I'm trying to understand the conversations between bioscientists and designers to pinpoint what really works in terms of leveraging their knowledge base. There's a useful concept called a boundary object that is used to pinpoint this knowledge sharing and knowledge creation. So you may have heard about this before. I think in design engineering, boundary objects are often related to like prototypes and things like that. But the official, or actually one of the official definitions is that boundary objects can be described as means of representing, learning about, and transforming knowledge to resolve the consequences that exist at the given boundary. So at the given situation, at the given company, at the given meeting. So also boundary objects can be physical things, but they can also be verbal things. So if I'm talking about some example about another company that's really capable for manufacturing a drug, then this company could also be a boundary object in itself. So what I'm doing, I'm trying to pinpoint these boundary objects in collaborations between scientists and designers. And the first way to do that is to just make observations and analyze the data that comes from it. What I have also found that there's 3 different types of objects. So there's the ones that record something in the dialogue or collaboration, the ones that explain something, such as a sketch, and also boundary objects that are generative in nature. So they're really quite immersive and they allow both of the participants to contribute into making something that represents new knowledge. And there is a huge overlap between boundary objects that are generative in nature and creativity. So this is showing where or what kind of design tool or design intervention we should be designing in order to support scientists and designers who want to collaborate. It should be something that that's quite involves both parties and make sure that that it's not one of the participants or parties that kind of runs and steers the collaboration, but it really draws information and knowledge from both parties, and it's quite kind of emerging experience that it provides. So how do we do that? There's a series of bio in the mix workshops that that we are running at Imperial College and RCA, whereby we have different types of bioscientists who come and collaborate with us to arrange and coordinate idea generation workshops that are really targeted for design engineers. But we are using either scientists themselves in the workshop. So we are asking them to collaborate with the students, or we are extracting information from the scientist and generating specific design tools that then communicate about the scientist's area of expertise. And we are hoping that the design students can then learn in a really effective and quick way about the science and use that effectively in idea generation. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. I'm developing a set of cards, and this is all based on the principles that I mentioned before. So it's about communicating scientific knowledge, but because all of these participants in the workshop come from different disciplines, the kind of information or the contents of the informations that we want to present in the tool also should show utility, new behavior if possible, new perception or scale as part of the kind of tool that triggers creative thinking amongst designers and others as well. Another thing that I found quite useful and interesting is that the tool that we develop doesn't just offer a piece of scientific knowledge on a piece of paper or in a digital version, but it's also combining different perspectives together. So what I mean here is that we also provide kind of incentives for idea generation. So, and what we like to use is the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So here's just an example of different goals that we have formatted on a card. And then we're asking people to combine this with a really specific scientific method or idea. and how can they make use of this novel scientific idea if they want to solve one of those big problems. So here you can see the tools, the cards that we've designed and we are currently testing with the workshops. And they're quite visually rich in order to cover all of these aspects that I mentioned about the scale or the perception or utility that's related to the scientific method. Obviously, the challenge here is the kind of preparation phase and often how the collaboration revolves, or the evolution of the collaboration happens, is that I have to set up meetings with the scientists long in advance to actually extract the information from them. And this is a kind of meta research that could be done in itself to kind of describe how you extract these knowledge pieces from the scientists. Because if you've ever seen or attended a scientific talk or presentation, then you can see that wide majority of those presentations are quite difficult to understand, and you don't really have a handle to grab onto when you want to use the information for idea generation. So there's quite a challenging journey that needs to be overtaken to arrive at this point as well. And I guess the future scenario, what we would also like to develop for this research, is to have a creativity assistant and kind of an online tool, which could detect emerging themes in group conversations and then provide feedback, which could either be visual or auditory, that would maybe ask questions from the participants and steer the collaboration in a kind of strategic way, because we could build a system that allows the participants to go through a journey which we think will build this understanding and knowledge base for successful idea generation. With that, I think I'm actually done, and probably didn't even overrun that much, but thank you very much. I'm sorry if the last part was a little bit quickly paced, but if you do have any questions, please do let me know, and I'm happy to discuss either now, or if you get any questions when after the presentations, also feel free to reach out and discuss. Thank you very much for the attention.
Amazing, amazing. Thanks a lot, Sander. It was really inspiring, really interesting, and really informative in terms of like your background, your journeys to date so far, alongside your research and the discussion of the collaboration between science and design. Guys, feel free to continue to gather your thoughts and questions and comments in the chat area. And as usual, there's also an option to go live and interact with your questions and sentiments. First and foremost, Talk Vidas, feel free to unmute yourself and go live.
Hi, Valk. So thank you very much for this amazing presentation. To be frank, I'm kind of same field as you are right now. I'm doing the placement at Dow Airbus at Front-End Innovation. And we go through, honestly, through the same madness, which is connecting different scientists from food science, packaging, marketing, and whatever people there are into one room right now virtually, and trying to figure out, okay, guys, what's next? What is waiting 5 years ahead? What is waiting for us now? So my question would be not about front-end innovation or the process, because you covered that very well. My question would be, what would be your advice for us as graduate or near graduate students who are trying to get into industry in these crazy times? What would be your advice from your current standpoint in industry?
Yeah, that's a good question. Thank you very much. It's kind of challenging to give a really good advice because things are moving so quickly. It's such a fast-paced environment. I think my advice will also be, and maybe this is kind of looking back at what I have done, is to start thinking more broadly about the skills that you have and where you could apply those. I think when I was graduating, I was quite fixed with the idea that I'm going to be a designer and I want to design great user experiences and stuff like that. But I kind of realized that the skills that I have could be used in other areas as well. And as designers, you have skills that you don't necessarily realize you do have. I think there's an awful lot about sort of project management and things like that you could really use in other areas as well. So I think it's important to zoom out from where you are and try to see where you could fit in, because if you zoom out, you start seeing the bigger picture. Yeah, I don't know if that helps at all, but that's my kind of half cliched answer to that.
Thank you so much.
Amazing. Thank you. Great question there to work with us. A question coming through from Navpreet. So Navpreet's asking, what sustainable development goal or goals do you feel most passionate about?
Good question. I don't know. It's really tricky to pinpoint one of those. It's, I don't know. If I just look back on the project, then what I've been kind of mostly working on is this idea of psychological as well as physical well-being. I think this is really tied together with the user experience side of things, and especially the sort of digital society that we're building. And I think there's stuff wrong with it, and we can definitely make a change there. So I don't know if this is the sort of mental well-being and physical well-being is the one that's most dear to me, but I think at least that's the one that's most close to me, because I feel that I can do something within this area.
Brilliant, brilliant. And Adam's asking, as a designer, what other industry fascinates you currently?
Well, I'm currently, what other industry fascinates me? Well, apart from science, which I've been immersed in, I guess I'm constantly looking into, I don't know, it's a good one actually. What fascinates me? Let me think about that for a second. Well, there's the obvious one that I'm pretty much being kind of involved with some forum or some activities relating to music. So I guess the music industry is something that's always been dear to me, and I've been doing many projects in that area as well. And I'm kind of quite worried about where the industry is going and how the industry is doing right now. So I do think about that a lot, and I have quite a few friends in that industry. So I guess it's related to that as well. But I think a lot of stuff from music industry has had a big impact in what I do and how I do it. So I guess it's got to be the music industry.
Awesome. And another question from Navpreet. Navpreet's asking, what would you suggest could make collaboration between different academic disciplines much easier?
Thanks. That's a good question. Thank you. Between academics, well, academics, I think it's about allowing yourself some time to actually immerse yourself in a creative conversation with the other. I think academics are extremely busy. Academics don't really have time to seek for much collaboration from obscure fields. So if you kind of have a strategy for planning this, I think a plan, strategy, and process is like a key words that always help. So nothing's going to happen if you don't plan it, but plan it well, and at least something will happen. Not necessarily a success, but something will come out of it. So I would say just make time, by which I actually mean prioritize, because we all have time, but you have to find the priority.
Amazing. And Andrea, feel free to unmute yourself and go live, Andrea.
Hi, Sander.
Hi, Andrea.
So you said before something that I found like really very interesting about that you didn't want to do like you wanted to do meaningful products or applications to the world instead of clutter the planet. And so my question would be, which would they be your like criteria or norms to accept a product or something as meaningful instead of clutter for the planet?
Yeah, thank you for that. That's a good question, and it's a huge question as well. I think that's it's kind of an impossible to answer that, but when designing, but also mostly when actually buying stuff, what I do try to think always before making a decision to buy something, I really try to think, does this thing really deserve to exist, and what is the reason for being for this item? So, you know, I'm trying to look at the thing and see how complicated it is, or how what of those bits could be recycled or turned into something else in the future. Trying to think in those terms. And in terms of finding the meaning of the product, yeah, it's really difficult to explain. But I guess when I'm looking at products, I do try to figure out their deeper meaning and what the intention behind that is, and then that will give me an idea whether it's worthwhile or if it's not worthwhile. And it's always a kind of a balancing act. I think, like most of the stuff what we do and buy, it's polluting and not great for us as a society, but we do it anyway because we're human and we are flawed. But you know, I guess I'm always trying to find justifications, because I know that, okay, it's a bad decision I'm doing. How can I justify it? Yeah, that's just my way of thinking, but I don't know if that answers your question at all.
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Amazing. Thanks for that, Andrea. And then how easy do you think it is to like collaborate between different disciplines? Like, so what in your research, what are the limitations that you've noticed or identified? And like, you know, you get some examples like the architect and the engineer, and then you have like, for example, group work in the academic setting, where like, you know, for example, group work can be quite challenging, or working with others, you know, it can be quite a complex process. So how would it be easy to facilitate this? And is it possible to like teach others how to collaborate and innovate together?
Okay, thank you very much. There were a few questions in there to try to start from somewhere. I think in terms of the sort of academic world and limitations for collaboration is, again, time, but maybe another thing would be the funding. And how do you make sure that these collaborative projects really do deliver for, you know, the bioscientists as well as the design engineering researcher? It's sometimes we do these collaborations because we're nice people, but there is not necessarily always a scientific outcome or usefulness for the scientists if they come and collaborate with us at the innovation design engineering course. Having said that, some of them are actually super curious because they've been somehow they found out about this magical thing called design thinking. They've been sold this idea of design thinking, and they also think that this is something that they can apply in their way of working. So they are actually quite curious in how designers work, and I think curiosity goes a long way. Yeah, you have to be curious to find out how others are doing things and learn from the others to make your own practice better. There was another part to your question, maybe. So I was like, how easy it was, or maybe
how would you
repeat something.
facilitate that? How would you facilitate like a collaboration, make it easy in terms of the process of working together in groups or in teams, multidisciplinary?
Yeah, I think there's a few strategies and activities, and broadly speaking, the kind of circular visual that I showed at some point could be used there. It's about having a strategic idea of how do you curate these interactions that take place in this collaboration. So I've also, next to these cards, developed a few other tools, such as like online templates and online kind of work kits that kind of impose a process. So coming from a design background, I'm always fascinated by this idea of a process, because if I'm kind of, maybe stupidly, but I'm kind of believe that if you follow the process, you will always get somewhere. You're not necessarily going to make something groundbreaking, but there is a certain beauty in the process. So if we had more of these tools, and this is something I'm kind of trying to advocate for and create myself, but we had more of these tools that understood the nature of interdisciplinary collaboration and interdisciplinary dialogue, then we could create more of these strategies and processes, because we know the different backgrounds, the different approaches from different people. So ultimately, if we unlock this, we can instantly maybe even take some of the design methods and processes and tweak them in order to make them suitable for interdisciplinary collaboration. And that's kind of what I've been doing at a few events as well. So I was coaching a climb-up-thon. So it's like an online hackathon for improving the climate situation, or the climate emergency, which took place last year. And then I used the vision and product design template kind of, and adapted this into a more approachable way of collaborating, because at the climate-thon there were people from all sorts of areas of expertise. So yeah, I think the one-word answer is in the process.
Trust in the process, right? Yeah, and then another question coming through as well is related to what you just mentioned, actually, in terms of design thinking. So other disciplines have, for example, cotton onto this key word and buzzword, for example, and they value that in terms of, it's the designers being able to offer something. And, for example, you can connect, designers connect the dots, they sense make, they bring people together, they make things happen. But in the reverse role, right? So how can designers benefit from scientists in the design process, in terms of, like, for example, in science, you have, it's very logical, systematic, well structured, there's a process, it's recorded, it's repeatable, it's robust. How can you bring that into the design process so that your process is also very robust, and it's not like the kind of cliche diagram where you got this kind of iterative process that's like a squiggle as such? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a good one. And maybe I would actually go as far as kind of question whether you do want to bring that rigorous scientific method and scientific process into design. I think they are complementary, and you have to have both approaches, but we don't want to kind of, or at least I wouldn't want to kind of dilute design as a discipline and become more like other disciplines, but actually kind of focus on the unique strengths that the field has. And this really is about, finding these dots and connecting these dots, and if it's possible to do that rigorously and kind of in a really methodological and scientific way. I don't know. I personally think, I have a feeling that this might not be possible, and I don't really know what the benefit of doing that would be. Mm-hmm. So I think the more beautiful thing is if we actually combine these things together, and designers can go and collaborate with scientists who are maybe lacking in some area, and vice versa. And out from this collaboration, you can actually come up with something that we need and want.
Amazing. And an example was, like, the cards that stemmed from your research and your workshops. So for example, in terms of maybe assessing or evaluating, the success of those cards, or how well they are rooted in a scientific process. Like, for example, is there an approach that you would perhaps recommend, or a series of approaches or techniques that could perhaps better root that in terms of that scientific research process, so that, for example, it's not subjective, that I like this or I don't like this, or this is right and this is wrong, but then, for example, it's coming off a framework or a certain conceptual model which you've taken, and you've kind of built those cards off it, perhaps.
Yes, actually, that's a good point, and I had to leave this out from my talk. But there is it's a framework that we have built to facilitate interdisciplinary collaborations, and it's focusing on human interactions and tools, as well as environments and mindsets. So there's a framework that we're working on. which considers all of these things. In terms of like, well, sort of measuring the success of the cards, it's there are many pathways to do that. So far, what I have done is kind of measure the perception of the success. So I've asked the designers and scientists themselves to rank or ask for their feedback in how they would how they would find the usefulness of the cards, and what was their reaction, and how did it change their process, and if they think that they came up with a better quality or idea, or a more sort of a worthwhile idea. And you can always compare this with conditions where you don't have the cards in present, for example. So that's one of the things, is to kind of measure and evaluate the perception of the cards themselves, and see how it changes the design thinking process. And then, yeah, no, I think that's about it, really.
Amazing. And then the final question that's a brilliant answer there, Sanders. And the final question there, you have like that 3-step process that you mentioned, where you got the shared knowledge base, and moving towards a second step is create, and then moving towards the third step, innovate. Perhaps would it be possible to share any like tips or tools or approaches or methods or techniques where you can go from create to innovate?
From create to innovate.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I think so. From create to innovate, what you can do is, I think it's mostly about making stuff and trying those things out. So if you look at the whole kind of approach of research through design, whereby you have a design and you put it out there in the world with real people, and you use that as a research probe to understand people's experiences. I think this could be something that sits in between this creative idea that you have embodied some sort of a prototype, and you think this is a really useful thing to have, and how do you innovate? You take this idea out and you do something with the real people who are going to be using it in the future. So that's where you kind of find and fine tune your idea to make it an innovation.
Amazing. Thanks a lot, Sanders. Thanks a lot for your really interesting and informative talk, and again for taking out the time to join us this evening. From all of us at Middlesex University, product design engineering, and design engineering, massive thank you from all of us. A superb lecture, and hopefully in the nearest future, like post-COVID, we would love to host you on campus as well, if that would be possible. Best wishes for yourself and the research in the coming months, and thank you from all of us.
Thank you so much for having me. It was great. I don't get to do these things too often, but it's good fun. It's a good way to reflect back on what's been done so far. So thanks for the opportunity, and would be great to catch up with you guys in the future on campus. That would be great. Thank you.
Amazing. And for all students, staff, participants, we really look forward to seeing you all again next Thursday. So keep an eye on your emails for the details of the speaker and links to the talk. And until next time, stay well, stay safe, and thank you guys.